thanks again to everyone for joining us today. We are really excited to launch this new series of weekly gatherings, really focused on highlighting innovative education leaders and cutting edge education ideas from all across Tennessee. You know, despite the many challenges that we know lots of families and students and educators are facing right now in the midst of the pandemic, we've really been impressed by how education leaders in post-secondary and K-12 education are responding, but also how they're remaining focused on creating greater opportunities for students, both now and opportunities in the future. And really in the spirit of SCORE's mission and commitment to catalyzing innovative change, and really aligned with our core values as an organization, that many of the most difficult challenges in education can be solved through creative and innovative solutions. We want to highlight entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders from across our state who are really leading the way in creating what's possible for students in Tennessee. And so our intent through these weekly conversations is to pick a single topic, a single sort of cutting edge idea each week, and do a deep dive to quickly learn more about that idea, that work, hear from leading entrepreneurs and innovators, and hopefully to trigger some thoughts or ideas that folks can take away and apply in your own daily work. I know how busy everyone is, particularly at this time, and so our plan is to keep these sessions pretty short, informal, and definitely no longer than about 45 minutes or so in length. Later in the conversation today, we'll be taking questions from folks, and just feel free to add them in the chat box as we go, and I'll pull up later in the conversation questions that folks have as we move through the conversation. And we just ask again that folks keep their lines muted as we go through the conversation. This morning, I'm really excited to have Dr. JD Hickey and Brad Leon join us to share the incredible work they're doing with Dr. Brian Nolan and the team at East Tennessee State University in launching the new BlueSky Tennessee Institute's Accelerated Tech Degree Program. With this new innovative effort, in just over 2 years, students can earn a Bachelor of Science in Computing from ETSU and also earn a job offer from BlueCross. And we definitely think that BlueSky is a model for the next generation of workforce development in Tennessee. And importantly, also think that the effort's really prioritizing building a pipeline of well-prepared Tennesseans, particularly from some of our highest needs schools and areas of our state. So with that quick introduction, I'm going to turn it over to, and maybe first introduce JD and Brad and then turn it over to them. But we'll keep these intros really brief. First, we've got with us Dr. JD Hickey, who serves as the President and CEO of BlueCross, BlueShield of Tennessee, overseeing our state's largest health plans. JD is also a member of the SCORE Board of Directors, and as a leader with both a medical and law degree, one of our most innovative and influential leaders, not only in healthcare, but in thinking through how we support all students and best prepare our workforce for the future. Thanks, JD, for taking time to be with us today. And then joining JD, we also have a good friend, Brad Leon, the Executive Director of the BlueSky Tennessee Institute. As a lifelong educator, and before joining BlueCross, Brad served for many years as the Chief Strategy and Performance Officer with Shelby County Schools, overseeing a variety of school improvement and innovation efforts in Memphis. And prior to that, Brad led state and regional efforts for Teach for America. So as a lifelong educator, knows this work really well, and excited to have Brad with us today as well. And just a quick reminder before I turn it over to Brad and to JD, feel free to pop questions in the chat as we go. We'll offer some questions up to JD and Brad as we go throughout the conversation today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to JD and Brad to share how this big idea first came about, why it's needed, and really how it works. JD and Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, David. Brad, why don't I take lead, and then you can fill in the details, correct anything I get wrong. So David, thank you. We're passionate about this program. As you can imagine, healthcare insurance execs during the time of COVID, this is a lot more fun than a lot of the other things we get to do right now. So we welcome the break. And this is a power group, and we're new to this. So I have no doubt that we'll come out here smarter due to some of the questions as well. So we appreciate it. I'll jump right to it. The most common question we get is, why on earth are you doing this? Why is BlueCross creating its own degree program? And the short answer is this is a business decision for us. We are a data science company. It's how we add value to our members. It's how we differentiate ourselves from our competitors. People tend to think of us as a claims processor, a claims adjudicator. And there was a time where we had over 1,000 people that did nothing but help us pay claims in our building. And that's not true anymore. There's last I checked, there's less than 50 of those individuals. Almost all that work has been automated. We process hundreds of millions of claims a year. 95% of that now is automated, and the remaining 5% we continue to whittle down through more and more sophisticated AI. And instead, we have 1,000 IS professionals, mainly software developers, mainly cybersecurity experts. And the way we add value is through data, health insights, and changing our members' health behavior. And we need more IS professionals than we can source. So at any given time, we've got 50 to 100 open IS positions at salaries that start north of $60,000 a year. And I think as we struggled to get that labor, both the quantity and the quality that we need, a couple things have happened over time. One is we increasingly outsource and offshore that entry-level software development talent. And that's deeply problematic for us. The capabilities are pretty awesome. We can have a new program come online, and we can call our IS outsource vendors, and we can have 50 new programmers by the end of the afternoon if we need. But we don't love to ship healthcare data outside of our four walls, let alone overseas. And as a nonprofit, we view employment, particularly in these higher end fields, as part of our mission. So it's not something that we love. It's also not a great long-term strategy if you believe that these folks are going to eventually be sitting in our C-suite positions as we grow into being a data science company. The other thing that happened over time, and I think this is the real origin for the program, is our IS team developed what amounted to an ad hoc 18-month curriculum to try to train up the hires that we were making so that they could teach them the languages, the software languages and tools that we use, and try to make them more productive. And that we looked at that and said, that's crazy. We got to be able to go downstream and try to fix the curriculum versus trying to do it on the back end. And so I'll just fast forward. We're now in front of prospective students as recently as last week, trying to convince them to come and join the program. And I'll flip through the offer real quick. You said some of it. We're offering a Bachelor of Computing. I think we can have a good discussion around why we did not design this as a stackable certificate program, but we decided to go the Bachelor route. We're doing it in conjunction with East Tennessee State University, which has been a great partner for us. And I'll be frank, we didn't have a long line of Tennessee post-secondary institutions raising their hand looking to sign up. We can have a discussion around that as well. But ETSU has been great to work with so far, and the degree will come out will be a full ETSU degree. We're positioning this like work, so this is every day. This is 9 to 5. This is year round. It's going to be on our campus. We're building this out now. And these students are going to learn side by side with our own IS professionals, on our hardware, on our software, our languages and tools. Because we are treating it like work, we're able to offer that degree in 2-year time instead of a traditional 4-year degree that it would take at ETSU or anywhere else. And you mentioned it, David, but we're offering a guaranteed job on the back end. We at this point, we're still new to this. We are not guaranteeing free. But our expectation is that the majority of the students who matriculate will have a $0 tuition. That, by the way, is particularly true for those students who are HOPE and Pell eligible. And we may get to a point in a year or two of this where we're able to say, you know what, we've been able to get 100% of the students through free, and we may offer that guarantee once we gain experience. We're also, we're not forcing the students to work for us on graduation. By the way, if 100% of those graduates all walk out the door and go to work for Unum or HCA or something else, we may have to rethink that. But the hope anyway is they'll like it here and they'll want to stay. And we're not going to dock them. Our return on investment is having them in their regular jobs at their regular salaries. So we're not going to ask them to sort of pay us back for this over time. One more probably sort of key design element that I should mention before I'll turn it over to Brad is we are specifically targeting diverse students from Hamilton County's priority schools. We think we'll eventually be taking students from all over the state. We're a statewide organization. Our board members sit all over the state, but we're particularly targeting that population. Listen, in part, that reflects our values and who we are. But again, it's also for us, it's a business decision. We believe in the business case for diversity. We believe it makes us stronger and more competitive. And listen, if we have the opportunity to tap into a local talent pool that's otherwise going underutilized, we're all over that. And I think we are convinced that this is a skill set that any student, if they have the opportunity, sufficient exposure and passion, any student should be able to learn. And our hope is immediately with our Future Ready Institutes, but particularly over time as we build in the supports, our hope is we build a true career sector pathway that starts in middle school in these Hamilton County school system and comes into our program and then results in a job on the back end. So we're pretty excited by that. And we've probably been at this, Brad, 4 years. We've had some really good education consultants who have helped us along the way. But we are now, just in the last few weeks, we're now in front of students. We're in the recruiting mode. And boy, it's been a lot of fun as we've made that pivot. Let me stop talking, and Brad, let me turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, JD. I think the one design element that I would reinforce is that we know all the data on college completion. And so we've intentionally built in robust student supports as a part of this model. We recently hired a student success manager who's going to be working with students prior to their matriculation with BlueSky all the way through to career placement. Because when we have a full cohort, we want to see not only that full cohort walk across the stage on graduation, but also to get jobs at BlueCross, BlueShield, Tennessee. And the last thing I'd just mention is that, my excitement to take on this endeavor as a career educator was that I was a part of many conversations about sort of a binary, whether all kids should go to college or not go to college. And of course, if it's just a binary, then I'm on the side of everyone going to college. But what I was seeing with the students that I worked with in Memphis was that many of them would go into college, accumulate tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, maybe pick up job skills that were marketable, maybe not, and would spend the first 10 to 15 years of their career either struggling to find a job or paying back debt. And the idea and concept of BlueSky, where a student is not only getting a job, but a job in a field that's going to be relevant and dynamic for the next 50 years with career advancement opportunities. JD mentioned, but I wanted to reinforce, we want the folks who go through BlueSky to be the future leaders of our company. And I think that is fantastic. And think about a 19 or 20-year-old starting out making anywhere between $55,000 and $65,000 and hopefully with no debt. I think that positions students completely differently than the normal model. And I think as a result, we have the real opportunity to make this a transformational opportunity, not just for students, but for the field of education.
Awesome. All right, I've got a bunch of questions that I'll just dive into if that works for you guys. And just would note for folks who are joining us, if you've got questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to just drop me a note in the chat box, and I'll be sure to tee them up to JD and Brad. One just quick follow-up question, JD, I had to what you described in terms of sort of the business case for the work. I was very struck by your comment that you think about BlueCross as a data science company and really thinking about would be curious from your perspective about what the need is in terms of just the size of the sort of needed incoming workforce in this area. But what's your need? What do you think is Tennessee's need just in general in terms of preparing students in the kind of information systems, IT, computer science, cybersecurity world that BlueSky is focusing on.
Right, I think you've actually got some of those statewide numbers, and I'll let you hit them. But listen, this is our single biggest hiring need, and I don't think we're unique, right? So when I talk to other CEOs, it really doesn't matter whether they're in the payer sector or healthcare or something else. I think it's one of the reasons why I believe we're giving these students a transferable skill set that they can take anywhere. But that phenomenon that I mentioned of having 1,000 claims adjudicators and all that work being automated, that's if you look at the other big departments in our company, and again, I think this is a broader phenomenon. That trend is only going to accelerate. We've got goodness, we probably have more than 1,000 clinical staff who do things like outbound calling to try to get members on the phone in order to try to convince them to change their health behaviors, get their preventative health screens. Increasingly, that's not what our large customers are looking for. Doesn't mean we don't need clinical staff, but they're not going to be doing outbound calling anymore. And more of that work is now automated and happening through digital interfaces with our consumers, text reminders, digital rewards, and the like. And all that is powered by our software developers. And so it's just, again, you know my background, David. I'm a Medicaid director back earlier in my career. If anybody had told the board of directors at Tennessee, 15 years ago that their CEO was going to be somebody who specialized in the government sector, they would have said they're crazy. And what I would say is 10 years from now, if not sooner, the next CEO of our institution is going to be a data scientist by training. And that's just going to continue to accelerate. Brad, you want to share some of those statewide numbers?
Yeah. So last year, Tennessee employers needed about 4,200 people with an information technology or cybersecurity background. And collectively, Tennessee colleges and universities were graduating a little less than 1,500 students. And so there's a huge mismatch between supply and demand. But as JD mentioned, it's not a BlueCross phenomena. It's not just a Tennessee phenomena. If I pulled up data from every single state in the country or every other country in the world, you'd see that there's a huge mismatch between the supply of graduates in this field and the demand, which is why I was excited in part to take this on, because I know that this is where really high-paying jobs are going to be in the future for our students, and was excited to take on that challenge.
So I'm fascinated by this connection between employer demand and need, and then sort of the way in which post-secondary is preparing students for that need. And so would love JD or Brad to hear a little bit more about what that process looks like around identifying a higher education partner to do this work. How hard was it to get them to think? I mean, this is a very sort of different and new approach, and would be curious to hear what that process looks like in terms of working with higher ed to sort of think outside the box a bit, and to take on this new kind of approach, this new kind of sort of challenge. Any lessons that you learned, or obstacles that popped up that you didn't expect, because I think this sort of intersection between workforce need and then what post-secondary is preparing students to be able to do is a really important piece of the puzzle, and would love to hear what that looks like for y'all.
Brad, why don't I start and you can chime in? So I think we were disappointed, frankly, by the amount of interest. We went out of our way to solicit every Tennessee post-secondary institution that had any computer science program to the table. We did a public RFP, a lot of prep on that to try to make sure those institutions knew what we were up to and had access to us so they could be part of that. And we didn't get a strong response, frankly. And part of me gets it, right? It's a pretty tough message to look some of those institutions a lot in the eye and say, listen, we don't like the product that you are producing, and we're going to ask you to turn your existing curriculum and program inside out. So I get it. We spend probably too much time with potential partners, looking back on how we spent the last 3 or 4 years, with partners who kept telling us that what they really wanted us to do is give them the money and they would go ramp up the production of their existing graduates, excuse me. And I just, ETS was pretty unique in coming to the table and saying that they were willing to rethink this. And when we said, hey, let's do this in 2 years versus 4 years, they didn't give us the laundry list of reasons why that wasn't possible. And I'll be frank. Listen, if ETSU didn't come to the table with us, we probably would have ended up with a non-Tennessee post-secondary partner. Some of those institutions exist. There are 2-year Bachelor of Computing degrees out there, or at least, I'm sorry, they're accelerated computer graduate degrees out there that are on campuses, particularly out west, business campuses. And so without ETSU, we probably would have gone somewhere else on it. My read on this, I'll just make an analogy that maybe makes me easier to understand. This is a little bit like GM and Ford trying to figure out how they redesign themselves from the ground up to prioritize electric vehicles. It's not a new car model. It's a rethink from the ground up, and it was hard. So we were probably disappointed and more frustrated than we should have been. We probably should have expected more of that, but we certainly have been pleased with East Tennessee University so far.
Yeah, the only thing I would add there is that when we were looking for partners, there were always pockets of interest within an institution, but what really differentiated ETSU, which is what gives me hope, is that this is not difficult or hard. What ETSU had that some institutions didn't have was really comprehensive top to bottom buy-in and engagement, because outside of just the Department of Computing at East Tennessee State, we're working with the admissions team, we're working with the recruitment team, we're working with the financial aid team, with the student support team. And you would get into conversations with some of these institutions, and there might be interest from the Department of Computing or computer science, but then when you would sort of broaden out to some of those other teams, the interest was not there, and they would essentially block the partnership from moving forward. So it's not rocket science, but what I think East Tennessee State had was not just leadership from Dr. Tony Pederisi, who is the head of the department, and also President Noland, but really every leader within that institution has been excited, deeply engaged, which gives me hope for the future that something like this can exist, because you can get that kind of alignment. And as JD said, very, very excited with East Tennessee State. They have been fully engaged and excited about this partnership just as much as we have been.
So, Brad, I want to switch to some sort of digging in on the perhaps K-12 side and the kind of incoming student side, and wonder if you could talk about the process of identifying, recruiting, selecting students into the program. JD mentioned at the beginning this real focus on priority schools, high need schools in Hamilton County as a particular place to be sort of building that recruitment pipeline from, but would be curious about sort of how you made that decision to focus there, what that process has looked like so far, and maybe sort of any lessons learned so far around the kind of selection recruitment process around which students are coming into the program on the front end.
Yeah. So when I came on, we were very committed to Hamilton County students. I think we wanted to start with students in our own backyard. And then as we grew and expanded, think beyond that. But for the initial cohorts, we're really heavily focused on Hamilton County. And as we got into conversations with East Tennessee State and in conversations with others about who might be a good fit for this program, we started thinking, about some core criteria that if folks are interested, they can see the full list on the East Tennessee State website for BlueSky. But I think primarily we want kids who have a real passion for the field. This is unlike other college programs where you can switch your major up 3 or 4 times. You're going in knowing that you want a career in technology, specifically within computing. So we're first trying to identify those students who have that kind of career-minded interest. I think a second big component is that we want students who see themselves as future leaders. Again, BlueSky isn't just for folks who want an entry-level position. We want to bring on folks intentionally who want to be leaders at our company long term. So students who have demonstrated real leadership. I think a third big component is that we're going to need to have students who have the ability to overcome adversity to reach goals. As everyone on this call probably knows, the data around college completion, as I mentioned earlier, is not very good. And so what we're actually shortening the time that kids are going to complete a degree, and we're asking them to take on paid internships and have a job at the back end. So we need kids who can overcome adversity to reach goals. So those are some of the key criteria that we're looking for in our applicants, and have also partnered with the Chattanooga Public Education Foundation to go deeper in what we're formerly referred to as gate schools, so that we can make sure we have the broadest and deepest and most diverse pipeline that we possibly can into this first and second and third cohorts that we're going through. And JD, I'd invite you in to see if I missed anything about the focus on Hamilton County or anything else.
No, listen, just one thing, that was excellent. The one thing I just underscore is this program is going to be hard, right? We took it a 4-year degree and crammed it into 2. I think the one thing that keeps me up on this program is we get a couple years into it and we start getting some of the graduation rates that we see in some of the other, post-secondary schools. And we're going into this with an expectation of 100% graduation rate. We're doing one-on-one mentoring with our senior team. But it is funny to me that when we tell people we're recruiting primarily from the priority schools, that I think people can be overly quick to assume that they interpret that as we're recruiting low performing students, and we absolutely are not. This is going to be a hard program. We're going to need high performers. By the way, there are plenty of high performers at these priority schools as well, and we know that through our partnership with PEF.
I'm going to start bringing in some questions from the chat box that we've gotten as well, but just got one question that's specifically about this kind of incoming student pipeline. Someone asked, how does a student qualify for the program? Is there a GPA or SAT, ACT sort of requirement? What's that look like in terms of how you're selecting which students are coming in?
Yeah, so the minimum requirements are the minimum requirements at East Tennessee State University. So that's a 19 ACT and a 2.3 GPA. And then, as I mentioned, we're layering on our own criteria that we think are going to help us find the perfect fit for this particular program. So anyone with the 2.3 and the 19 ACT is eligible for admission at ETSU and for this program. But we're also going to ask students to interview with us, folks from BlueCross, folks from East Tennessee State University, and all of us are going to be evaluating those students against the criteria that we think is going to make for a good BlueSky student. So beyond those minimum requirements, it's the qualifications that I just mentioned about passion for the field, et cetera.
Right. And then one other, maybe last question, zooming a bit out on the kind of K-12 side. And Brad, would love your thoughts on this. I mean, given this experience, what you've seen so far, and also your own experience in the K-12 system prior to working on BlueSky, what are the things that you would encourage school districts, or particularly sort of high schools, to be doing differently to reorient themselves to be able to prepare students for this kind of experience? I mean, my sense here is that you're sort of pushing down from the employer side and saying this is what the pipeline should look like. This is the kind of change we want to see at both the post-secondary level and at the high school level. But another way to think about it is that there's some changes that are taking place at the high school level, the K-12 level, to better prepare students for this kind of experience. And would love any recommendations or ideas that you might have for K-12 partners around how to best position students for opportunities like this.
Yeah, David, I think that's a really great question, because as we scale up the program, we're going to need to have a much deeper pipeline, not just in Hamilton County, but everywhere in the state of Tennessee. And I worked directly with high schools in Memphis, and also worked on our scheduling team with our student information team. And I will say that I think this is a lift that is going to require both state and district collaboration, because I think any high school principal will tell you now, one of their greatest challenges, and it's kind of a behind the scenes challenge that not a lot of people are aware of, is scheduling students. And you have state requirements for graduation that almost entirely take up the entire schedule for a student. So if you wanted to create a deeper computer science pipeline, we're going to need to work both at the state and the district level to create opportunities for students to take those kinds of courses that would count towards graduation credits, because electives are just a very small part of the schedule. So if we want to reach down into elementary school and in middle school and even into high school, we're going to need to work on what counts towards graduation requirements, which is not a lift that high schools alone can take on. It's going to need to be some kind of a partnership. And I think it's a worthy one, and it's low hanging fruit, because again, this is where the jobs are going to be for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And ensuring that we have the ability to do that is going to be really important.
So I want to turn to a couple other questions again in the chat box. And again, just encourage folks, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. But one question we got is about potential policy barriers or policy opportunities that you surfaced out of this project so far, and wonder if there are any, whether it's at the state level, at the local level, either policy barriers that you feel like need to be addressed to be able to do more of this kind of innovative work, whether it's at BlueCross or other places, or whether there are places that policy could accelerate opportunities like this and closer connection between workforce, post-secondary, and K-12.
I'll take a stab at it, Brad, and you can jump in. So listen, one really tactical one is the Pell and Hope Scholarship design. We're a 2-year program offering a 4-year degree essentially. And the way those programs are set up right now, the way they're structured, is we can only tap into 50% of the available funds because we're a 2-year program. So we're hoping to get some of that language changed so these students can benefit from the full Pell and Hope scholarships. That's a tactical one that they're working on immediately. Broaden the lens a little bit. Another big one I would just say is the maybe I'm gonna open up too big a box here, but the core reimbursement for post-secondary schools. Listen, there just frankly is not enough signal around graduation and job placement, and I think that would change this discussion. And by the way, that's probably a starting place to push the envelope a little bit. How about student job success? A lot of this is having lived through this in healthcare around value-based reimbursement. A lot of this has very strong parallels for us. When we had those initial conversations with providers a decade ago, a lot of pushback. You can't possibly hold me accountable for the ultimate outcomes on these patients. And yet that's where the sector is today, right? That's very common. The providers who did embrace that were hugely successful at it. And I listen, other than cocktail conversation, I don't think I've had a single formal outreach, and Brad, you can weigh in if we have, from a Tennessee post-secondary leadership that said, listen, I want to know how my graduates are doing 2-3 years in. Are they meeting your needs, and how do they compare to the graduates from the other programs that you hire? Because we've got the answers to that. We know the answers to that. In some instances, it's not a great story. One last thing I'll just hit, and I'll be quiet here. There needs to be way more dialogue and data sharing between Tennessee's large employers and the local post-secondary institutions around who they're training relative to our hiring needs, our future hiring needs. And by the way, that's how you would get at that job success as well. So if you could tap into that data, you could be tracking that and you could feed it back. I'll turn it back over to you, Brett.
Yeah, I think that was a home run, JD. I think that if we were to do something like that and evaluate post-secondary institutions on job success, job placement, not only would we probably would have had a much more robust pool of Tennessee higher ed institutions excited about this opportunity, but it would also probably solve for the issue that I mentioned around scheduling. So if everything is geared toward job placement, I imagine more flexibility would be created at the high school, middle school, and elementary school level to start ensuring that kids were getting really germane curricula on topics like computer science. So I think that's an outstanding answer.
Few questions we've gotten in the chat about a little bit more information around the sort of the structure of the experience at ETSU. So one person asked, how's the accelerated degree program structured? to help students get through the normal college prereqs and then quickly steer towards higher level computer degree requirements. And then similarly, someone asked, what are the gen ed requirements, or are there gen ed requirements in some of the sort of typical 4-year college coursework like literature, American history, natural science? So would love to hear a little bit about that kind of the ETSU piece of the experience.
Yeah, it's a full college degree, so all of the gen ed requirements that would be required at East Tennessee State University are required in BlueSky. Students are going to be plugging in through Zoom or other online platforms to plug into those courses, because they're going to be taking all of their core computing with BlueSky in our headquarters. How do we get to the 27 months is what I was also reading into one of those questions. I mean, we're getting rid of any and all breaks. I mean, they're going to be starting next August. They're not going to have winter breaks. They're not going to have summer breaks. They're going to be going all the way through, as JD mentioned, a much more work-based experience than a traditional college experience where they're going to be going 9 to 5. So, I mean, that's how we're going to get to the 27 months. And they are going to have to take all those requirements.
Great, thanks. All right, I'm going to maybe turn to one or two other final questions, and then we'll wrap up here to be sure we get done by 9:15 or so. Maybe one other question would love to hear some thoughts on is whether there are pieces of this model that could be replicated in other degree programs, other business sectors. How much of this is unique to BlueCross's need or the need around sort of data science work versus a model that should or could be replicated across other sectors?
Well, I'll say that part of my excitement in joining this was I saw the easy replicability to really anything else. I thought, I was living in Memphis at the time. What was really stopping, FedEx and Memphis from partnering on a similar initiative around logistics, a degree, that is accelerated degree? There's really nothing stopping, maybe beyond having a great example of this. But I do think that this is the kind of thing that can be replicated with partnership. And one thing I do want to say on the business side that JD and the team did before I came on, which I think enabled this whole thing. You'll hear a lot of employers say, hey, you're not producing what we need. And I heard that a lot when I was at Shelby County, but few, if any, and BlueCross did this, have articulated exactly the knowledge and skills that they need folks to have in order to be competitive, not just for jobs, but for success at BlueCross. A fully exhaustive list, which enabled East Tennessee State to say, here's where we're going to be able to meet your needs given what you have done. So I think on businesses side, they need to go through the process of fully articulating exactly what they're looking for in various fields to enable higher ed and others to plug into what they're looking for. And BlueCross did that really, really well.
Great. All right, last question for me. And this is a question that we're going to ask for each of these Friday sessions moving forward, but want to ask you both to zoom out a bit. And obviously a focus of these Friday sessions is to really highlight innovative work, entrepreneurs who are driving forward the sort of next phase of education improvement in Tennessee. And so I want to ask you to look ahead 20 years or almost 20 years. We're in 2040. And what do you predict will be the biggest or most important change in education over the next 20 years, whether it's K-12 or post-secondary? What is going to look different, or what should look different might be another way to ask the question based on your perspectives and vantage point. And would love to hear thoughts from both of you, and then we'll wrap up our time today.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start. Listen, I think this trend of employer involvement and getting directly involved is only going to increase. By the way, we treat BlueSky as open source. Our hope is that ETSU, UTC, others will take this model and plug it into other large employers around the state. We encourage that. And I just think you're going to see more of that. The large employers are going to move to where the labor supply is. If they can't move, then they're going to have to get directly involved in the education pipeline. in order to get better talent. The other thing I do just think these old dusty models are increasingly gonna have to get blown up. The 4 to 2 year degree timeline was a very tactical example of that. I'll give one other that, listen, we haven't solved it yet, but it's something that we talk to ETSU with regularly. The old paradigm where you get trained in your 20s with your education and then it's good for 40 years, like that just doesn't hold anymore. We need a lifelong learning model. The discussion that I have with Dr. Nolan is we need a subscription service on the back end of every bachelor computing degree that we offer, where these students can come, these graduates, excuse me, they can come back and they can get a tune-up as new languages and new software become available. By the way, you don't necessarily have to go back to the campus for that. A lot of that could be virtual. But again, just a bigger example of, I think these old dusty models are increasingly going to have to get blown up and adapt.
I mean, I think connected to what JD said, I think what's both low hanging fruit, but what I expect to happen over the next 20, 30 years is a gradual move from time-based to competency-based education. And that really transcends the entire K to 16 spectrum. I mean, it's such a, I think straightforward idea that if you've demonstrated mastery in something, you should be able to get credit and move on. I do think we're going to get there, and I think it's going to be necessary. And you could see a program like BlueSky going from 27 months to 18 months to 12 months. If a student has demonstrated competency, they could get the credential. So I think that that's something that can and should happen.
Awesome. All right, lots to think about, and obviously we promised to keep these sessions to about 45 minutes or so. So want to respect everyone's busy Friday ahead. Thank you so much, JD and Brad, for kicking off the series. Really, really innovative approach here. Excited to hear about the work and lots to think about coming out of the conversation. Before we close, want to also invite all of you to join us again next Friday for our second session, same time, September 24th. And we'll welcome our friend Derwin Sisnet from Memphis. Derwin and his colleagues are seeking to solve for a very unique challenge that many high-performing schools simply exist within their communities and are not actually sort of part of the fabric of communities. And so Derwin's going to talk about the exciting new Lighthouse project that he and his colleagues from Maslow Development are working on to really center and surround high-quality public schools with strong and supportive community ecosystems. So I know folks won't want to miss that conversation. Look for registration info later this afternoon, as well as a link to our session this morning. And thanks again to all of you for joining us. Thanks to JD and Brad for kicking off the series, and hope you have a great day and great weekend ahead.